I'm Fiona Reynolds. I'm the Managing Director of the Principles for Responsible Investment based in the UK. And I'm here today with the CEO of QOP, Dato, who today became the first pension fund to become a signatory to the PRI, and we're here to talk about responsible investment. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. So in light of what we've seen as an increased adoption rate of ESG principles across the globe, what are your thoughts on Malaysia's positioning in respect to responsible investment?
This responsible investment is supported by the government, cascaded down to the regulator, and obviously from the regulator to the players in the industry. We are the players in the industry. As for the government, for instance, of course, the government has made certain signed certain agreements and initiatives, among which is the Paris Climate Accord, and then the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And at the regulator, Bursa Malaysia and SC has their own framework to encourage more investing companies or listed companies to adopt those ESG principles. But players like us, we are not under those supervision of the regulator. But I think it's our duty to play that role to our stakeholders. For QOP, for instance, being a pension fund for the public sector, our role is towards our stakeholder, which is the pensioners, and the existing civil servants, and the future generations. So we try to incorporate all that three-dimensional stakeholders that we have for us to become to invest responsibly. Our fund size, 140 billion, I think is sizable enough to be influential. And as a provider of capital to the investing public, I think we can exert an influence to our investing companies.
And in terms of QOP's corporate level guidelines, what are some of the key elements of your ESG positioning and guidelines internally?
Okay, at the corporate level, what we did was that all our investment considerations and activities have taken into consideration the ESG element when we consider that before we start even undertaking the projects. And then at the same time, on the investment side, I think we also, at the corporate level, we become an active shareholder and an active investor. We engage directly with our investee companies. For instance, mentioned that last year, normally every year I personally visited about 25 companies, but last year we did slightly more. We visited 27 companies, not just locally, but also regionally. And every time when we visit them, the engagement about company's performance, company sustainability, and company ESG initiatives, will never escape. And at the same time, on the local side, what we do is that we also engage them of the national agenda, among which is obviously the board independence, board diversity, and women representations in board and management as well. So we incorporate all that to ask our investee companies to comply.
So why do you think there have been multiple initiatives really emphasising the importance of ESG aspirations via sustainable development in the local Malaysian context?
Okay. I think we need to engage at various levels, obviously, I think, as I mentioned, at the highest level where the government and government's agencies are, at the regulators, and at the institutional investors side, I also sit as a chairman of the Institutional Investors Council, and I think I use that platform to do part of my engagement on sustainable and responsible investing, ESG in particular. For instance, one of them, what we did was that we engaged one of the companies that has had some headline issues on ESG breaches, and we went to see together with 4 or 5 other institutional investors as a joint effort, actually. And then that was the first ever joint collaborations to engage our investee companies on a concerted collaboration basis. What we need to do, again, I say, we need to engage at various levels. And for us, what we do is that, again, we engage our investee companies via our company visits. But the reality is that some of the thing is that it depends on the various asset classes. Asset classes like equity is much easier for us to engage with our investing companies because we are shareholders. As shareholders, we have a lot of shareholders' rights. It's much easier. But when you invest in sukuks or fixed income, for instance, there are so many other parties that is part of the investing companies, and that will be a bit more challenging to do engagements with the investing companies. Again, the other one will be the alternative asset class. Will also be very challenging to do something on it. But the listed companies will be much easier for us to do that engagement because of the power of the shareholding that gives.
So when you go and visit companies as part of your engagement program, what kind of responses are you getting? We see today that there's a lot of evidence that shows that where you engage with companies, where ESG considerations are taken into consideration by companies, that there's a better return of capital. What sort of response are you getting, and have you got any good examples that you can share?
Yes, I think there are good examples, and there are examples that I think are not great. I think when we engage our investing companies, obviously, the minute we ask for an appointment to see them, obviously they will make some preparations, in particular to anticipate what we are going to ask. But generally, most of the investing companies, they do embrace the principles of responsible investments. But one thing about sustainability is and responsible investments is such a big word. It's a big area. I think we need to focus on certain key issues in particular. For us, I think we prefer on the ESG aspects rather than, and we focus on certain parts of the ESG to ask them where they can contribute towards the society, to the climate, or to the overall governance, which probably will reflect performance of the companies. So for us, I think that engagement is very critical, and we do collect our database. But to some extent, one of the challenges is that actually we feel that a lot of them are also doing it out of regulatory reasons rather than out of their willingness to comply. So I think that needs to change actually, and of course we do tell our investing companies that we feel that they are dragging their feet or slow to adopt this. We'll tell them straight. There's no hiding or there's no politeness. Sometimes it's just best to tell them off. But the challenge is about it's best if it comes internally within the organization rather than being forced by rules or compliance, or rather than that.
And when you're talking to companies at the moment, have you got a few core issues that you're talking to them about? I know over the course of the last couple of days, people have talked about the issue of diversity, for example, as being an important issue that they're engaging on. Have you got some core issues that you're talking to companies about?
Yes, again, we do. On top of, normally what we do is first thing when we do our company visits, we identify the companies and the sector they are in. We tend to focus on companies that have issues because those are the ones that needs the engagement. But for start, our approach is a soft approach. We know that we are new in this space, and the country is also new, and the companies are new in this space. So we adopt a soft approach. So if there are any breaches or any compliance issues with regards to the ESG aspect, it is about engaging them and asking them to try and improve their risk management, their compliance, and to comply with that. So that's our from the beginning. We are very clear on our approach of what we want to do with them. To get them to embrace all these things. And then, of course, we ask those questions, obviously. We look at, first thing, of course, financial performance, which is also very critical for us, And then we look at the other parts, which is the other aspects of the responsible investments, including the ESG part. And then we ask, and of course, we will look at the national agenda. But a lot of them are, I think one of the national agenda is the 30% women participation in the board. I think, and a lot of them They do have, but generally they're still short of that 30% target. I think they're working on it. Only 7 companies, as the last numbers, are not having women directorships in the boards, the top 100 companies in the country. We would also try to look at the social aspect. So these days we also want to look at the companies to embrace the community, and we want to always also ask questions about how they engage the community in terms of what they contribute back towards the society, because we ourselves are doing it internally, and we want our investing companies also to be doing something very similar.
Yeah, I see it very much about the company's social license to operate. How do they operate in their community? How do they operate in the country that they're in, as very important aspects of responsible investment. So we started talking about responsible investment with QOP in 2015, and now it's 2018, just turned, and QOP became a signatory to the PRI, which is fantastic news, and we're so glad to have you as a signatory. But I know that it's been a lot of work and it's taken a lot of time to get there. Can you talk a little bit about what you've had to do to get yourself ready to be a signatory?
Yeah, I think there are some internal issues on our part. I think first thing, of course, the team. The team is a very small team. We are not such a big kind of organizations, and with the team working on so many things, I think we need to prioritize. But what happened was that actually in 2015, when we started working on it, we thought it was probably a bit like a simple process of meeting certain percentage of the asset class before we become a signatory, and then after that we get the board and the investment panel approvals, but it was not enough. I think we fail to see that it requires even up to the government level, the ministry levels and the Solicitor General's office levels, because we are governed by our act, So after going through that process, we got board approval sometime middle of last year to become a signatory. And obviously that was not the end of it, because we had to engage with the Solicitor General's office due to whether we are infringing on our act, the act that QOP was established upon. And then after that, we need to engage with the legal side of the Ministry of Finance, which is also our other stakeholder, So only upon those clearance by those two legal side, which happened to be in the last 3-4 weeks ago, then only we managed to get, that final approval to become a signatory. But generally, we obviously would like to share our journey with our other investee companies and other institutional investors in Malaysia, because to make them easier, because what we went through, was quite tedious. At least now we can share that to accelerate, their participation or their signatory to the UNPRI as well. So for us, I think again, where we went through, especially a company and institutions like us with our own act, I think we need to look at the legal side in particular, whether we are infringing our legal issues. For us, I think that was a learning curve, and I think we are willing to share with our other counterparties here to enable them to fast track them becoming a signatory to the UNPRI.
That's great to hear. One of the things about being a signatory to the PRI is promoting the principles and working collaboratively. So it's really great when you've got organisations that are leading the way, who are willing to share information with other people.
It's not just obviously the local, we want to share it with our regional counterparties, obviously. But for again, as one of the new signatories of the code, I think obviously we need to live to the standards of the code. We want to show improvement year by year where we make progress. I think among which is, of course, our key challenge is, of course, some of the external fund managers that we outsource our money, Some of them has their own head office, which is globally located, They have their own, the final say of how they manage our money rather than just about us putting in our mandate, you know. So a certain percentage right now, let's say 15% at the moment, of our mandates are outsourced to external parties, and hopefully we can also get them to be on the same wavelength, you know, to be on the same footing as our aspirations. But I think it's still a challenge, you know. But generally, like I said, you know, we engage with them. I think tomorrow I have an engagement with the entire outsourcing community or external fund managers that we have in this region in particular. Some of the global ones will not be able to come because of they are located in London and overseas. But those within the regions, I think they'll make it a point to come, because tomorrow is the day that we engage with them. And obviously, when we engage with them based on the performance, based on the, we will also ask them issues about their thoughts on the ESG and the responsible investment part, actually. So that engagement that we do is very, very critical to ensure that all of us are embracing the same, way things ought to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the engagement with the fund managers is just as important, because it really therefore is asset owners who bring about a lot of change, because then they start to talk to their managers and want their managers to show what their abilities are as well. You're planning to have a conference this year looking at some of the environmental issues. Do you think that some of those issues have been lagging a little bit behind in Malaysia? Are you trying to bring them some of them to the fore? What's the purpose of the conference that you're going to have?
No, I think what we did was, when we organized last year the ICGN conference, the International Corporate Governance Network Conference, we were the host country and the host institutions. We did it sometime in July last year. We noticed that the awareness of good governance has always been there. You know, I think governance has always been talked about. And then, of course, the social part, the S part, has always also been various companies has various social initiatives and community engagements, you know. But the E part is actually lacking. So we thought that ultimately that is where we want to focus on our conference this year, to focus on the environmental part. And I think over the last couple of years, I do notice that there has always been forest fire, forest burning, smokes from the region and from our own local community coming into and affecting our health. And, and we felt that I think that part needs to have a bit more awareness. And I think that is why for that reason, we felt that we want to organize a conference on the environment, and to probably focus. We are engaging with the WF, if I'm not mistaken, and they will provide us some guidance about what should be our focus area. Environment is also a big thing. I think there are some focus area within the environment, and they will probably also make some recommendations to us on the speaker and the topics of discussion. And we, of course, would like to engage your side, in particular the PRR side, about certain speakers and certain expertise in this area, to be able to come and give their views on certain issues. Even your own self and your own staff in particular, we probably would like to have some representation from our part. We are estimating about 350 delegates for this. And we probably will allocate 50% to international or regional delegates, and the remaining 50% the local delegates. I think we want that kind of robust discussion, sharing of experiences in various parts of the global markets.
Well, I know that we'd be delighted to participate. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for your leadership. And it's been really interesting to be able to spend a little bit of time here today talking about Co-op's approach to responsible investment.
Thank you for having me here. I wish you well, and I hope we'll be able to become an important member of the UNPRI.
I have no doubt.